The Handkerchief by Great 78. Chapter 91. Newspapers. Necklace. New Leadership. Nefariousness. Hours later, the remaining Death Eaters were finally allowed to go, disapparating back to their homes. As one of his first orders of business, Thickness had lifted the wards of the Ministry, allowing anyone with the dark mark to apparate in and out of the building. It was one of numerous concessions and changes that the newly installed Thickness had made, and that the remaining Death Eaters and Ministry workers had been told about. Certain departments were disbanded. Others' statuses were raised significantly. The improper use of magic office, for example, was broken into 2 separate departments, one for magic-born wizards and witches, and the other for muggle-borns. This latter one now reported directly to the Aura Office, and was overseen by Dolores Umbridge. Additionally, she was given a large support staff for special projects. Having been a member of one of Umbridge's special projects before, Draco shuddered to think of what the witch would come up with under Lord Voldemort's regime. Back at the manor, Draco sat down to eat a late dinner with Pym in his room. Before they began, Draco checked his handkerchief one more time, as it had warmed only a few minutes before the Death Eaters were dismissed. "We encountered 2 Death Eaters almost immediately in Muggle London. We aren't certain how they found us, but we obliviated them. It was Dolohov and Roll. Harry suggested that we may go to the Black House. I was a bit wary, because I know Snape can find us here, and I'm not certain which side he's actually on. But it's been an hour, and so far no one else has come. We're going to sleep here. At least, I hope we can go to sleep. Harry is upset about Ginny, and I'm fairly certain he's crying in the bathroom. And Ron is upset about his entire family. We had to leave the wedding so fast. It was all such a blur. Luckily, I've been packed for weeks." So that was where those 2 particular Death Eaters had disappeared to. Draco wondered where the others had gone. Had there been others whose protective enchantments had broken? And how had they been broken? What new magical law had the Dark Lord made that Thickness enacted that had brought this about? But she had escaped, and somehow had managed to bring Potter and Weasley with her. Tonight, at least, they were safe. Draco pictured the beaded bag she'd carried when leaving her house after obliviating her parents. He knew it contained all of the essentials, plus a lot more. He just hoped it was enough. The following morning, he sent her a message. "Is everything still okay? Are you still safe? There were several Death Eaters that left. Dolohov and Roll were not the only 2. About 30 minutes or so later, her reply came. "Safe. Looking for something." Draco gathered that she was around others, and couldn't really talk at the moment. It was several hours before she wrote to him again. "It has been an emotional day. We thought we were about to find something important, but it turns out that it had been stolen by Mundungus Fletcher. We're working on getting it back." "Hopefully you can find it soon, then," she wrote. "There are Death Eaters outside of the house. Dumbledore used to be the secret keeper of the Black House, and once he died, everyone who was told the house's address became a secret keeper for it. We think Snape must have told them about the house, and where to find it, but for some reason they can't come in. There is a tongue-tie curse that Moody put in place. We think perhaps Snape's tongue is tied about the address." This seemed a bit unlikely to Draco. If Snape had wanted to reveal the house's location, he could have. When Moody died, that tongue-tie curse was likely no longer working outside of the Black House. Something else must have attracted the Death Eaters to that area, but he wasn't sure what. The Death Eaters could not go inside, though, and that was the most important thing. At the next meeting, Voldemort asked for an account of the Death Eaters who had left the Ministry during the takeover, presumably to investigate runaways and those for whom the protective enchantments had broken. Many were punished for their failures, whether real or perceived. Draco was unsurprised but glad to see Roll and Dolohov take the worst of it, for losing Hermione, Potter, and Weasley. Voldemort's meetings and missions were happening nearly daily now. Draco found himself fluing and apparating all over the countryside, searching for Muggle-borns or raiding business establishments in the company of other Death Eaters. However, he was clearly not enthusiastic about this work, and Lucius sometimes suggested another person go in his place. Occasionally he would go to Gringotts, checking the security enchantments there, an innocuous task that did not typically put him in contact with the public. Most often he spent time at the Ministry, sitting through meetings in the company of Death Eaters, now masquerading as Ministry department heads, or worse, with Dolores Umbridge. He truly thought that he had been well shot of her when she left Hogwarts. To find her to be a presence in his life for multiple days each week was disheartening. The old, prim witch was, if possible, even more smarmy and annoying now than she used to be. Now, with actual might behind her, she strutted around the corridors of the Ministry as though she were in charge. Draco realized at some point that Lord Voldemort hadn't even needed to imperious her, to make her do his bidding. Draco and Hermione updated each other daily on how each was doing, and what they were up to, but he noticed that she spoke very vaguely about what it was they were seeking. He understood. These kinds of things were to be expected. He, too, kept some things secret. Many of the meetings within the Ministry had revelations about people they knew, and many of them weren't good. He learned, for instance, that in the hours after the fall of Ministry, many people he knew had been questioned, and even tortured. Neville Longbottom and Hannah Abbott had been cornered in Diagon Alley and questioned. The protective enchantments around Andromeda and Ted's house had failed. They had been tortured in an effort to locate Potter. Finding Potter was the primary focus of several members of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, of which Corbin Yaxley had been made head. There were rewards offered, search missions planned. Any potential sightings of certain wanted people in connection with him were investigated. He encouraged her to stay within Black House, to stay out of sight. It was only a matter of time before a search team was set up to look for her. In the 3rd week of August, just that happened. The Thursday Daily Prophet ran a list of Muggle-borns wanted for questioning. When he saw the headline above the fold, his appetite for breakfast disappeared entirely. Bellatrix sang a folksy little ditty, tunelessly, further down the table. "Search them out and cut out their tongues. Going to find me some Muggle-borns." Draco stood up from his seat, dropping his napkin to the table. Narcissa's eyes were locked straight ahead, staring at the wall to his left. She knew that he had seen the article, and that he was likely going to warn Hermione. "Drakey-poo, did you see? They're going to find all those filthy muggles that you missed. All the ones that escaped you." Draco picked up the paper and walked out. Back in his room, he looked more carefully at the list. All 9 of the ones that he had reported as escaped and fled were listed. It should have been 10. Willingham didn't have to die, he thought, but pushed down the intrusive thoughts of the boy's hand outstretched on the ground as he lay dead. As it was, the only 2 that remained in danger were Ted and Hermione. Everyone else, he was fairly certain, had already escaped the country. If he could just have convinced the 2 of them to go, they would have been safe too. But it was the memories of Willingham that haunted him the most. That night, she sent him a new message. "I need to talk with you a bit about what we're looking for. I think you might be able to give us a bit of help." He responded immediately. "Anything. Just tell me what I can do." "I'll be in London tomorrow. Can you meet? There's an alleyway behind a theatre near where the public entrances to the Ministry of Magic are located. Can you meet me there at 9 in the morning?" "I'll be there." "I will be under Harry's cloak, so don't be surprised if I sneak up on you." Draco was glad that she had told him that. He had quite enough surprises and scares to be getting on with these days. The next morning at 8:30 he set off for the public entrances to the ministry. Because of his dark mark, he had never had to use these entrances, but because of the grumbling from lower-level ministry workers about the changes to the Floo network, and how frustrating it was that private Floos could no longer be connected to ministry ones, he knew where to find them. He located the alley quickly, then stood at the alley's entrance and pretended to read the newspaper. About 5 minutes later, a hand touched his back through his robes. Thankfully, his nose had detected the softest hint of gardenia immediately before she did so, otherwise he would have jumped a mile. "Let's go into this theatre. There's a dressing room that isn't used. I overheard the actors one day on a smoke break. All of them said it was haunted." Going into the theatre, they found, surprisingly, no ghosts. He made his way to the dressing room that she indicated with her whispers, and he moved with the confidence of someone who knew where they were going, just in case the muggle stage manager or building manager stopped him. Once inside the room, he cast every measure of protective enchantment and muffling curse. She removed the invisibility cloak and launched herself at him. They kissed for several minutes, and Draco felt as though he was regaining life force. He felt a surge of warm energy and magical power that he seldom experienced these days. "Merlin, I've missed you so much, the sight of you, the feel of you, I can't tell you what it does to me." "You to me, too. I missed you so badly. Although you look tired. I'm guessing that the job of a Death Eater double agent is a bit taxing." "A bit." He smiled wanly, holding her around the waist. "So, not to rush you, but can you tell me why we're here? Typically, I prefer to take my dates to a nice restaurant, then perhaps the theatre. And when I say theatre, I don't mean the haunted dressing rooms in the back." "Just how many dates have you taken to the theatre?" Hermione raised a brow at him, running her fingers through his platinum hair. "Well, none, yet. When this is all over, are you doing anything?" Draco drawled, kissing a line down her throat. "Hopefully enjoying dinner and a show with you," she said, pressing herself to him. Draco felt himself stir at the feel of her, but he knew that now was not the time. "Okay, what's going on?" "Harry, Ron, and I need to get into the ministry." Fuck. This was all so fucked. This whole plan was fucked. As he apparated back home, he went over what she had told him again in his head. She wouldn't explain the importance of this locket that they were looking for, only saying that Potter needed it. He had seen the ugly locket in passing, noticing it around Dolores Umbridge's squat neck. He remembered thinking how gaudy and silly it had looked on her. Hermione and the Wonder Duo had been scoping out the ministry entrance, and had found a few people that apparated in at nearly the same time each day. Their plan was to polyjuice themselves as these people, and infiltrate the ministry in an effort to get this locket. She had asked him to try and find out where Dolores kept it when she wasn't wearing it. She also asked that he keep a lookout for them, on whatever day they decided to go. Part of the problem with this was that Dolores Umbridge knew that Draco did not like her. It was clear in every interaction that the two of them had that he did not respect her, and she could tell. If he suddenly expressed an interest in her, wanted to know more about her, it would seem suspicious. He had to come up with a plan. On Sunday, September 1st, Draco awoke feeling a bit down. Ordinarily he would be meeting with his friends, getting ready for his final year at school. But it wasn't to be the case this year. Yes, a letter had arrived from Hogwarts a couple of weeks ago, but Draco was certain that it was an oversight. At breakfast he unfolded the paper to an unexpected bit of news. The Daily Prophet reported that Severus Snape would take over as the new headmaster of Hogwarts. This should not have surprised Draco, but it did. It had seemed only natural that Professor McGonagall would be tapped for the job, but then Draco realized that, as a likely member of the Order, she would never be chosen. When Voldemort took over the Ministry, he'd probably started working on the Hogwarts Board of Governors as well. Evidently, they had caved to his pressure. All summer, Draco had assumed that he would not be going back to complete his 7th year. Now, with attendance compulsory and Snape installed as headmaster, his path was clear. He realized, though, that this year would be vastly different. Lord Voldemort would not allow Snape as his only confidant and puppet within the school. Dolores Umbridge would be certain to tell Voldemort not to do that. He was going to place a team there. His handkerchief warmed in his robe pocket. "Harry has decided that we need to infiltrate the Ministry tomorrow." Well, shit. He'd barely had time to think about putting a plan in place, and Potter was ready to move on it. First Snape as headmaster, now this. Inexplicably, he was reminded of something Tiffy used to say when he, Theo, and Blaise used to come into the kitchens, begging for a snack only an hour before dinner. "Bad news always travels in threes, young Master Draco." If that truly was the case, Draco wondered how long he would need to wait for the third bit of bad news. It wasn't a long wait at all. Voldemort called him to his father's study that evening. The dark wizard sat imperiously behind the desk, looking through a large dossier. "Ah, Draco! Come in!" He turned back to his papers to resume his reading, eyes flicking side to side as he read. Draco stood at attention and centered his walls of occlumency carefully in his mind, readying himself for the time when the man's notice would turn to him. After a minute or so, Voldemort looked up and spoke. "Young Malfoy, I have an assignment for you. As you undoubtedly saw in the Prophet, Snape is the new Hogwarts headmaster." "Yes, I read the article this morning. I am certain that Professor Snape will do a fine job as headmaster. I had not expected to be allowed back at the school, so it pleases me very much to read it." "Yes." Voldemort eyed him carefully, his red eyes glowing. Draco tried his trick of looking just lower, at Lord Voldemort's mouth instead. He noticed that the man's tongue seemed far more involved in speaking than other people's. It was quite disturbing, though far less disturbing than the fact that he had no nose. Draco's eyes flicked up, and he automatically strengthened his occlumency. Syrup of hellebore, rosemary, plimpy venom. The Dark Lord continued. "It took a bit of persuasion on my part, but he was set to begin work today. I understand that you had not expected to go back to school, but they shall look for your late arrival later this week. I shall give you an extra day or so to collect your school things and to say goodbye to your family." "Yes, my lord," Draco murmured to Voldemort's mouth, occlumency walls firmly in place. Voldemort stood up from Lucius's desk and came slowly around it towards him. It took everything in Draco not to step discreetly backwards. "As I'm sure you know, many things within the school often escape the notice of the faculty and staff. Therefore, I wish for you to be the eyes and ears from within the student body." "I understand." "If there is discussion of an uprising or talk of building an army, please tell Professor Snape. Potter and his closest friends did not arrive on the Hogwarts Express tonight at Hogsmeade. So, likewise, if any students are in touch with Potter or his blood traitor and mudblood friends, they will need to be interrogated and punished." "Yes, my lord." Draco was dismissed then, much to his relief. Taking a one-on-one meeting with Lord Voldemort was fairly high on his list of things he never wanted to repeat. He was just thankful that Tiffy's saying wasn't that bad news travelled in 5s or 7s. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Handkerchief by Great 78.